Okay, so are you ready to get a little weird? Let's do it. We're taking a deep dive into the mind of Elon Musk.
Buckle up.
Yeah, you might have heard there is this new biography out by Walter Isaacson, and it is, well, let's just say it's a lot.
It is.
But that's why we're here. Look, whether you think the guy's a genius, a total wild card, or somewhere in between, this deep dive is for you. We're going way beyond just like rockets and tweets, you know? We're trying to figure out what makes the guy tick.
And what those motivations, those inner workings, well, what they tell us about innovation, leadership, maybe even a little bit about ourselves.
Exactly. And Isaacson, he really gets into it. Like, he doesn't just chronicle the successes. He digs into the origin story, all the messy stuff. I mean, we're talking about a pretty intense childhood in South Africa. Bullying, isolation.
A really complex and frankly pretty difficult relationship with his dad.
Yes.
I mean, you read some of this stuff and you almost think, wait, is this where the supervillain origin story starts? Like, not your typical tech CEO backstory.
Right. So how does somebody come out of that? I don't know, not totally messed up.
Well, that's what's so fascinating. Isaacson connects this actually to this recurring pattern he saw with other, heavy hitters he's profiled, like Steve Jobs, Einstein. It's like this early adversity. It's almost like a crucible, right? Forges this, I don't know, almost superhuman level of resilience.
Okay, so maybe what doesn't kill you makes you Elon Musk. But come on, resilience has to come with a price, right?
Oh, absolutely. And with Musk, it feels like that price was pretty steep. I mean, Isaacson talks about how, and this is wild, as a teenager, Musk moves back in with his dad.
Wait, really? Why would he do that?
So the reason Musk gives is that he associates pain with love. I mean, how crazy is that? But that little detail, it just opens this whole window into the complexities of the guy.
I mean, you really have to wonder how much our adult behavior, the good and the bad, is shaped by those early patterns, even the painful ones. Have you ever noticed that in your own life? Like, do you ever find yourself gravitating towards situations or relationships that, I don't know, maybe echo your past a little too closely, even if they're not like the healthiest?
It's funny you should say that. It's something I've definitely noticed in my own life and with people close to me.
Yeah.
I think it's something we all do to some degree. And while this whole childhood adversity thing is definitely interesting and worth considering, and Isaacson really emphasizes this, it's just a pattern, not like a universal law. Plenty of people come from, supportive, loving backgrounds and still end up changing the world.
True. But with Musk, it feels like it's all kind of tangled up together. The drive, the ambition, this like almost defiant way of tackling problems, which leads us to, I think, what everyone really wants to unpack, the whole Musk method.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important to acknowledge right off the bat, like first principles thinking, that whole thing has become such a buzzword. People slap it on a PowerPoint and call it a day. But Isaacson actually shows us how Musk uses it. And it's way more interesting than just a thought exercise. You remember that story about the server farm?
You mean the one where he decides to just, I don't know, yank the plug on Twitter's entire Sacramento server farm on Christmas Eve?
On Christmas Eve, because, redundancy is expensive. And Musk, true to form, goes for the most direct and totally disruptive solution. We're talking Home Depot wire cutters, the whole 9 yards.
I can only imagine what those engineers were thinking. Elon, maybe we should, back up a few terabytes of data first.
Right. But the thing is, it worked, at least for a little while. And it kind of sums up his whole MO. Find the problem, get rid of all the assumptions everyone else takes for granted, and then go for the most audacious solution possible. Even if, and maybe especially if, it sounds completely bonkers.
Sounds a bit stressful, to be honest. So walk us through it. How does this Musk method actually work?
Well, there is a method to the madness. Remember that 5-step algorithm Isaacson lays out in the book. And this isn't just some abstract thing. Isaacson's right there with Musk. We're talking Tesla factory floors, those infamous, late-night design sessions where apparently very few ideas are off limits.
Yeah, so break that down for us. What's step one?
First, you got to define the problem, right? Seems obvious, but a lot of times people jump to solutions before they really know what they're trying to solve.
Fair enough. Don't want to put out the wrong fire. So what's next?
Then you gather as much information about that problem as you can. And not just from, whoever the so-called experts are, but from anybody who might have a different perspective.
Okay, so step 2 is all about arming yourself with knowledge. What about step 3?
All right, so here's where things get interesting. Now you break down the problem into its fundamental principles. And this is pure first principles thinking. You're basically asking, what are the absolute undeniable truths at the core of this thing?
You're stripping away all the assumptions, all the baggage that might be clouding your judgment. Okay, so step 3 is all about getting down to those bare bones. What about step 4? What happens then?
Step 4 is where the brainstorming starts. I'm not talking about like your typical, whiteboard session. This is about thinking outside the box, challenging conventional wisdom, and coming up with as many radical ideas as possible.
Wow, I bet that's equal parts exhilarating and terrifying. It's like no idea is too crazy as long as it addresses that core problem you defined back in step 1.
Right, precisely.
Okay, so we're almost there. What's the final step? How does this all come together?
All right, so step 5. Now you test. And you iterate. And you test some more. And you're not afraid to fail. In fact, you embrace it. You see failure as a learning opportunity. So you constantly experiment, refine, adapt your approach until you find something that works.
So to recap, you're basically saying that Elon Musk's entire philosophy is to challenge everything, break down complex problems into their simplest forms, and then test solutions relentlessly until you find a solution that works.
That's the Musk method in a nutshell. It's a process that demands incredible intellectual agility and, let's be honest, a tolerance for risk that most people wouldn't be comfortable with. But there are a lot of people who are drawn to this move fast and break things mentality.
And I imagine it leads to a pretty unique workplace culture.
To say the least. Isaacson actually mentions this detail that I thought was fascinating. At SpaceX, engineers, they have to put their names, literally sign their names, on the rocket parts they're responsible for.
Wow. Talk about accountability. I can't imagine the pressure.
Right. But can you imagine the pride? Having your name on a SpaceX rocket. Talk about taking ownership of your work.
Yeah.
Have you ever, encountered that kind of, I don't know, maybe not to that extreme, but that kind of thinking in your own work?
That's an interesting question. I mean, not on the scale of launching rockets, but I definitely see how that level of ownership could be motivating,
Well, and that's the thing about this whole Musk method, right? It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It impacts everyone and everything around it.
And sometimes it's a pretty intense impact. I mean, look at what happened with Twitter. You've got this, hardcore, all-in style, slamming headfirst into a very different kind of culture.
It's almost like, I don't know, watching a hurricane try to merge with a book club or something.
Yeah, it's like, talk about a culture clash. On one side, you've got this drive for speed, for radical change. And then, well, you've got a company that was known for, at least before Musk showed up, for, collaboration, maybe even a slightly more relaxed pace.
Right. And suddenly everyone's talking about psychological safety, and Musk is basically grabbing the wheel with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, and let's be real, it wasn't pretty. I mean, Isaacson has this quote from Musk where he's basically like, psychological safety? Forget that. Urgency is the name of the game. It's kind of hard to miss that message.
Right. Talk about a culture shock.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, though, is there a middle ground? Can you actually have real, groundbreaking innovation without sacrificing the well-being, the sense of security of the people doing the innovating? I'm curious, what about you? What kind of environment do you do your best work in?
That's a good question. I think it's something a lot of companies are trying to figure out these days, right? Musk's style, I mean, it gets results, but it can also lead to, burnout, fear. Which, speaking of, kind of makes you wonder, with all this ambition, all this drive, is this guy ever actually happy?
Right. I mean, you have to ask, this is someone who's, by any measure, achieved what most people only dream of. So is he like kicking back on a Martian beach somewhere, totally content?
Living the dream.
Right. And this is where it gets interesting. Isaacson asks him, point blank, are you happy? And Musk basically says, no. Not in the way that, most people think of it anyway.
Okay, so what? He's like some kind of, I don't know, ambition robot who doesn't need joy. What's the end game here? If not happiness, then what?
That's the million-dollar question. And Isaacson really digs into this, like what makes this guy tick? He compares Musk to someone like Bezos, who seems to actually enjoy the spoils of success a little more.
The yachts, the whatever else billionaires buy.
Exactly. But Musk, he seems almost uncomfortable with contentment. It's like he's wired for, perpetual motion, always pushing boundaries, even if it means, sacrificing his own personal fulfillment in the process.
It reminds me of that story Isaacson tells about Musk selling all his houses. I mean, all of them. Do you get this? To try and appease his daughter, who apparently was not a fan of her dad's, shall we say, capitalist leanings.
Right.
It's like, on the one hand, you see his values. He's putting his money where his mouth is, right? But on the other hand, you kind of get this sense of, disconnect. Like he's trying to buy his way back into his daughter's good graces.
It's such an interesting contradiction, and Isaacson points out that this pattern, it kind of repeats in Musk's personal relationships too. It's like he craves connection, intimacy, but then he also seems to really struggle with like the vulnerability it takes to actually let people in.
Which maybe explains why his love life makes a SpaceX launch look like, I don't know, a relaxing train ride.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a recurring theme. And this brings us back to this idea of Elon Musk as like a study in contradictions. I mean, this is a guy who calls himself an alpha male, but then can be incredibly like self-deprecating.
Yeah.
This is a guy who once, and I'm not making this up, stabbed himself in the leg with a welding torch.
Wait, what?
It's true. It's like he's both aware of his flaws and totally cool with them all at the same time. And you can't argue with results, right? This is someone who's landing rockets, trying to get us to Mars, revolutionizing transportation, and let's be honest, genuinely trying to tackle some big, scary problems.
Yeah, he's not afraid of a challenge, that's for sure. So how does he do it? How does he manage to pull all this off?
Well, it's not just about the technology, right? It's his ability to inspire this kind of insane work ethic in everyone around him. Isaacson talks about how Musk, and again, I love these little details Isaacson puts in, how Musk once made this team assemble a rocket in like an insanely short amount of time, even though they didn't even have a launch schedule.
So why bother?
Because for Musk, that pressure, that urgency, that's where he thrives. It's like he's constantly testing the limits of what's possible, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. He's famous for these, what he calls forcing functions, setting these like seemingly impossible deadlines to basically jolt his teams into, coming up with the solutions they wouldn't have even considered otherwise.
So it's like that old saying, if you want something done, ask a busy person.
Yeah.
But like on a whole other level. But again, you have to wonder at what cost. It does make you wonder about the toll it takes, like how sustainable is it really to live life on that edge all the time?
Exactly. And that's something that Isaacson keeps coming back to, this tension between, the sheer awe of Musk's achievements and then the very real human cost of how he gets there. The burnout, the strained relationships, let's just say the public meltdowns. It's all kind of part of the package, isn't it?
Right. And it makes you wonder, I mean, is it even possible to separate the man from the mission at this point? Like, can you have Elon Musk saving the world without, also kind of burning it down in the process?
That is the question, isn't it? And Isaacson suggests that Musk's motivations, they might be even deeper than just like ambition or ego. He paints this picture of a guy who's, he's actually really afraid.
Afraid? Of what? Like not making enough money?
No, not quite. Isaacson talks about how Musk is like haunted by these big existential threats. Climate change, obviously, artificial intelligence getting out of control. Even like the possibility of humans just, wiping ourselves out completely. I mean, that's some heavy stuff.
Yeah, that'll keep you up at night. So is that what all of this is about then? The electric cars, the rockets, colonizing Mars? Is this all just like one big elaborate plan to, I don't know, save us from ourselves?
Yeah. It's complicated, right? But I think there's something to that. Musk seems to see his companies as more than just businesses. Like they're almost these lifelines for a world that's, kind of teetering on the edge.
Wow. So we're talking about a guy who's playing cosmic chess, and the stakes are the survival of humanity. Okay, so just to be clear, you're saying that Elon Musk, the guy who tweets memes about his dog and throws raves in factories, this is like our best hope.
I don't know about all that, but I think Isaacson's point is that it's precisely that willingness to defy expectations, to like embrace risk on a massive scale, to push the boundaries of what we think is possible. That's what makes Musk, as frustrating, as baffling, as whatever you want to say. He's undeniably fascinating. He's one of a kind.
Yeah, he certainly keeps things interesting. But even if he pulls it all off, the Mars thing, solving climate change, merging our brains with AI, all of it, will it ever be enough? Or is he just, like Isaacson says, kind of wired to chase the next impossible thing, forever seeking but never quite, finding?
I think that's the question Isaacson leaves us with. And it's a big one, right? Like, what does it actually mean to be successful? Is it about money, status, changing the world? Or there's something else, something more, elusive, something even Elon Musk, with all his brilliance, all his ambition, might never fully grasp?
It's a question we're all trying to answer, I guess. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought to ponder. If success for Elon Musk isn't ultimately about personal happiness, then what's it all about? What drives him? And maybe, more importantly, what does success look like to you? What is it that drives you? That's something to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brain cells firing.